We finished up the website last time and everything looked okay, but we do have some problems, and that is um, when our website gets smaller, these start to wrap. So let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm going to right mouse click, go down to inspect, and that's going to open up the Chrome inspection on the browser on the bottom. And that's not the important thing. I'm going to go ahead and grab the right wall and start moving it in so we can see what happens when a person looks at this at a narrower device. So you can see that we have these things right here are fluid, so they'll get bigger and smaller as the device gets smaller, and that's okay. Notice also up here, you can't see it now, I can't move the mouse and keep it up there at the same time. It's showing us how narrow, how many pixels. So right now it's 556 pixels, and if I slowly make it down, when we get to right about here, then everything breaks. You can see that this down here is not looking too good either. We probably want to fix that. And then when I get a little bit narrower, so right around 458, when I click on this, it wraps, which isn't a terrible thing, but yeah, we wouldn't really want to have that. Wouldn't we like to have something else happen when we get to this narrower one? So this is pretty small. This is probably the size of probably nowadays about a standard smartphone would be even larger than the 458. So we're going to say when it gets to this side, we're going to make this we're going to change the CSS, or we're going to change the CSS so that it fits on a big phone and smaller, so we can fix this part right here and also fix this down here. Alright, since we know that that's what we're looking at, we're going to make the breakpoint about 460 pixels, just to narrow it down. Really 458 is where it breaks, and that's what we call a breakpoint, but we'll do 460. So we're going to have to do a media query for that, and we have to put some code in specific to that. But first, let's go ahead and open up our file. So we have tennis template and we have tennis CSS. So we want to, when we start monkeying around with the responsive, I recommend that saving everything first. So we're going to do a file, save as. And what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new file called tennis template underscore static. And this is our static site. So both static and tennis template both have the same code. And then we're going to go into tennis and do the same thing. I'm going to do a file, save as, and I'm going to call that tennis underscore static. Then I'm going to copy this file name and then save this. So you can see we have now more files. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go over here to static and change the CSS file from tennis CSS to paste it in tennis static CSS. And I'm going to do file, save all, and then I'm going to close these two. Those are my backup copies. Now I'm going to go back to the one I'm going to be working on, and for that it's going to be tennis template and then tennis CSS. So if we hose this up completely, we can always go back to our backup, and I recommend that you do that, especially when you're first starting out. Not just go ahead and blindly do everything in one file and then find out that you have completely screwed it up and now you have to start all over because it would take longer to fix. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a media query down here that said from all the styles below this is going to only work on screens larger than 560. Does that make sense? All this up here is going to be less than 560, so 559 and below will be what we'll be using up here. So I'm going to go to W3 Schools. W3 Schools tells us what the syntax is, and the syntax is going to look like this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and move on back to my HTML CSS
and paste it in. Well, this is 1001 pixels, and we wanted ours to be 460, so I'm going to get... Now you can have several media queries. If this was a more elaborate page, we might have, you know, 1000 and above, 800 and above, 600 and above, 400 and above. So each one of those would have, depending on the breakpoints, would have different styles. But for this one, it's a fairly simple page. We're only going to have that one breakpoint. I have to come over here and I have to close this tag. So I'm going to that. So this is where it starts. This is where it ends. I'm going to go ahead and comment here. I'm going to say end of 460 pixels. And then I'm going to select that and hold down the control key and press slash. Particularly when we're using several of these, you want to have a comment telling you where each one ends so it doesn't get so confusing. Alright, first we're going to do is see if this works. So I'm going to put in there something fairly typical, and that is we have an H1 on the page. We're going to change the color of that. So we're going to say H1, and then color, and we're going to change it to red so it's obvious when it changes. Alright, then we're going to go ahead and do a file and then save all, and then go back to our page and see how things change. Alright, so right at this point here, you can see that's about 900 pixels in width. So that means that this H1 up here should turn red when I reload the page. So I'm going to reload the page, and sure enough, it's red. Then when we bring it down below 460, you can see again lower. It's going to be right about here. You can see that once it gets below 460, where our navigation breaks, it turns back to black. So that shows us that that media query works. Above 460 it's red, below 460 it's black, and that's what we want to change. The fact that this is wrapping here, that's not an issue. I'm not too concerned about that. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what we can change. I'm going to keep that red color there throughout this lesson because that lets me know where the breakpoint is. But when I go to production, I'll take that red color off because I don't want it to be changing color depending on the size. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next thing. Alrighty. So we can see that the nav-ul-li is the issue. Nav-ul-li. We're displaying it inline block, so it's going side by side. When it gets to a tiny phone, we don't want them any longer to be side by side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go down because I want it inline block only when it's above 460. Oops, come on now. My mouse doesn't work. Okay, so I'm going to tab these in. We'll move these in so we can see. Alright, so I want this to have these properties only when it gets that large. So now I have to say, well, when it's small, what do I want the properties to be? And actually, for this, I'm just going to comment these out. So I'm going to select them, hold down the control key and press the slash. Now those no longer apply, which says that I want it to display as block because that's the default value, and I don't want a width on it. I want to take up the entire container. And let's see how that changed everything on our page. So I'm going to do File, Save All, and then I'll go back here. It's red, so when I refresh it, it shouldn't change. Sure enough, it doesn't. But now look what happens when I move in. Once I hit that breakpoint, boom, look what happens. Now our buttons turn the entire width all the way down to the smallest spot. See, so this is going to work all the way down to the smallest phone. You can see this just stacks nicely up here.
Everything's looking good. What? Okay, this down here is looking bad. So we need to fix this down here also. Alright, so let's go ahead and bring it back out again. Alright, what we want is, we want to have this underneath that when it gets smaller, not squished, because there's just not enough room for both of those elements to be on the page. So let's again go back into our page. Let's find why they are wrapping. And that's down below here. Okay, so if you remember, what we did is we floated the article to the left, we floated the article, this article to the right, and we gave them those widths of 25%. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these, and I'm going to paste it down here and say, whoops, see that once it gets to 460, let me move this over. Now we want it to it doesn't do a good job of getting this the way I want it. Okay, so at 460 I want them to float and I want them to have those widths, but up here when it's a small size I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out these two. Now if remember, overflow auto was there because these were floats. So I could remove that, but it's not going to give me any bang for the buck because A, it's not going to do anything if I leave it up there. And other than that, I have to copy this and paste it down at the bottom, so I might as well just leave it where it is. Everything else should work pretty nicely, but that's this section and article on the lowest on the smallest size is not going to float and not have a width until it gets down to here, and then it will float and it will have a width. All right, so let's see if that works. Do File, Save All, and then refresh. Okay, so nothing changes here, but once it gets below 460, and that's going to be when we hit the end of that navigation, bam. All right, now the navigation changes, and now where is our, there it is. So the only thing I might want to do now is at the smaller size put a border at the bottom here. So let's go ahead and do that. So that is going to be here. Let's see, where is it? Okay, come on now. At the smaller size, I would like to have the section article have a border on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this comment, move it down, and then I'm going to take this comment and move it up so that I can add to this article border bottom, and then I'll be 2 pixels solid blue, so just like our footer. And then I want to get rid of this section here because this should have been commented out, and I'll do Control/. Alright, I could have put a top border on this one or a bottom border on that one. Same. Alright, so I'm going to do File, Save All, and then refresh. Boom. So, okay. The only thing I need to do too is now I got to take this bottom border and remove it once it gets bigger. So copy, and then that was the article. So I need to add it down here and tell it. I think if I make this 0, that will fix it. Alright, so I'll do File, Save All, and then refresh. Alright, so that stays there. When we get bigger and it goes side by side, it is not floating. What's going on here? Floating to the left, floating to the right. was something I did up here. Section article. Okay, that's all I did there. Box sizing, padding. That was working and then I broke it. The border bottom should make a difference. Alright, let me pause this. Okay, the problem is this right here. I forgot that. File, save all. Must not have copied it perhaps. And then we'll go back here and refresh. Boom. Everything's now copacetic. Alright, so that's it. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and add some content now that everything is working absolutely perfectly.